Welcome to the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Englander.
Raul, great to have you back on the show.
Dan, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, likewise. I like that the show has been on long enough now that I get to have like friend of the show episodes that I tend to prepare for less, but sometimes that's good. Sometimes it's a little electricity to the episode. Before we get into that, for those that don't know you, can you talk a little bit about your background and how you're working with clients and so on?
Yeah, Raul Hernandez in San Diego, California. I do strategy to help digital marketing agencies scale with high profits. Started in 2016, helped companies double, triple, 5x with millions of revenue. I helped build an in-house team that produced 50 million in sales. So my expertise is a lot in the marketing the marketing strategy, but then also running teams, building teams and scaling teams and just helping entrepreneurs and founders do cool things and make life-changing money.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just to give a little more context, like how are you getting to what do your programs typically look like? Are these training group done for you, et cetera, in terms of how you're...
Yeah, we refined that a lot in the last couple of years. Right now, it's a group mastermind. All the trainings are in there, and there's 2 calls a month, and we bring in guests and support and really just help them with the basics to get to a certain level of revenue with profit. And then I have private clients that I work with one-on-one. That's typically a 3 to 4 month engagement for $5,000 at right now at this recording, right? It's pretty low end, but the whole goal is for them to get the strategy, get the expertise, get the support, close more sales. And then from there, we work on a partnership to really help them scale and put the fuel in the gas.
Yeah, that makes sense. And getting back to positioning, which I think I'll give you a little bit of backstory. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I think a lot of the times when I was thinking about our positioning, yeah, we work with agencies, but like you can get fractalized and keep kind of zooming in on the group that you serve really well, even if you have like one vertical like us, like agencies and B2B services that you do well. And historically, I've always thought about it as like, well, revenue. So if a company's between X and Y, they have these issues and these problems, and million and all the problems are solved, or it's headcount or something that's easy to measure. But when I kind of dug into things, I was like, it's really not necessarily tied to that. I felt like we were kind of shooting ourselves in the foot a little bit because we would turn down good business or take bad business or whatever based on these arbitrary numbers. And really it was like sort of about the level of sophistication people were at, in our case, when it came to sales and lead generation and these sorts of things. And we would talk to agencies that were like 20 years running that had big teams, multi-million-dollar revenues, but were like elementary level in terms of sales. And then we talked to small agencies that were very sophisticated when it came. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, how do you think about positioning and like the groups of clients you serve? And by extension, how do you encourage clients to think about that?
It's pretty good. It's pretty relevant. I had a private client this morning and we were talking about her 3 levels of positioning and the 2 nuances to it. So to your initial point, when it comes to the arbitrary dollar amount or the size of company, I think that's easy to qualify in terms of list building or who you want to target. Like they need to have this industry, say these right things and look like this. And that's good for demographics. But there's essentially 3 components to it. The first one, you actually have to start with the person you're actually working with, like who you're selling to. And I like to use DISC assessments, but like they're essentially different camps. Someone's either a controller, someone is super analytical in how they make decisions, someone's a promoter and super excited and like they're not good at operations, but they're super good at everything else. Others are supporters. And I have clients that fall into all those different camps. The key thing is to identify what's your best client. And I dive into what made them the best client. Because there was something about them that made them an exceptional client. They had different beliefs about sales, they had a different approach to how they did things, they had different goals or missions or values alignment. There was something there. But then you also have to look at, well, what do I wish all of my clients did? Like when you're looking at your roster, is like, okay, these best clients did these actions. I wish all of my clients took these specific actions. What were those actions and why did they take those actions? And that's the first prong of approach. The second is what you talked about, the demographics, the industry, the niche within that industry, and just really focus and fine tune. Because you might say like, oh, I work with healthcare agencies or agencies that work with healthcare and I would do really well with them. Like then you can segment that way. Then the third approach really is to dive into like, what do you actually help them do? Okay, you help them increase sales, but what does that look like? What is the actual output? What's the transformation? One of my dudes, he is in the UK and he was helping companies break into the US market and e-commerce. That's a big transformation. We define the types of products he worked with, the types of people he worked with, the types of buyers or prospects, like their personality, who they are. The key thing is like, what is that transformation? You got to fill in all those 3 together. And then on the transformation that you have, there's 2 nuances there. The first one is really the what is it? What is a tangible thing? What am I getting? What can I touch? What can I feel? What is it? Time frame, expectation, dollar amount, whatever, the measurable. But then the other one is the how. And this is where your IP, your unique process, your unique way of doing it, maybe your mission or the types of people you hire or your talent that really breaks through. And what we're going for is just like differentiation. Like I have a client and he's a Green Beret. Like he served and he was a Green Beret and he doesn't really talk about that in his marketing. And like we kicked him like, hey dude, like you got to talk about this in your marketing. Why? Because I know if I hire you, you're going to get things done. You're going to say, it doesn't matter. We're going to get the mission accomplished. I know things are going to be on time. The strategy is going to be lit. I'm going to feel taken care of. Another client, like she wants to change the approach of how part-time moms work online. And her bigger mission is to serve moms and change work culture. She's doing that through the agency. Like, that's freaking amazing. You got to highlight that. Like if I know I'm working with a group of badass moms, like they're going to get things done. They work hard. They know time management. So like there's different ways to approach it, but it's always about, again, the three-pronged approach is who is it that you're actually selling to? Their personality, their worldview, their characteristic, what made them different and the best clients. So optimize for the best. Then it's the traditional niche industry, quality, size, revenue, whatever. And then it's the tangible transformation. And then the hidden, the how. I think when you tie that together, you can to really, really differentiate. And I think to your point on not just serving a market deeper, but I think you can be less afraid of like, oh crap, like am I turning down the wrong business?
Yeah, I think that's really good. I'd love to get into how you're helping clients figure out which permutations of those things work, right? Because it's like, it's really easy to swing based on emotion, based on like, a sales call that goes wrong or goes really right. And I think in the agency world, especially, the data is very small because so many people are starting out at a baseline of like inbound referral, right? Where it takes them a long time to get data on things. So I guess what I'm getting at is like, is there a time at which you're like, okay, you've done this many calls, you've been at this for this amount of time. Here's where you switch gears. And how are you testing these things if they're kind of ephemeral, like accentuating your background or talking about this, that, or the third about your offer and so on?
It's a really good question. I think it's like this two-pronged approach. There's the research part to make sure that you're aiming in the right direction. And then there's the actual testing it tactically in the marketplace. So I got to give credit where credit's due on this one. This is David C. Baker and Jonathan Stark. Like they talked about when you set your positioning, it's usually going to be like an 18-month process between the business that you're currently taking in and the business that you're wanting to take in. Because you need cash flow no matter what, right? So there's going to be that transition phase. And I love how Baker mentioned that. I think it was Blair Enns who told Baker that. But there's that transition phase. But when you're researching, you're really diving into it. Like this is where you got to put your marketer hat on. Like what are the trends in the marketplace and where should I actually invest my energy into? One of my clients, she was looking at health tech and or fashion. Which one do you think we chose? Health. Yeah, because the trends and the things that are happening. So you do research. I love using IBIS reports, any industry related research where growth, the numbers, the number of businesses, the opportunities that are there. You just need to make sure that you're aiming your arrows in the right direction. But then when it comes to testing, it's through the talking of people. It's through setting up the right mechanisms so they actually get exposure of that. Because your positioning might sound great when you talk about it, but you also need to talk about someone else and saying, okay, what do you think when I say this? And you don't say that indirectly. You just say, oh, I helped do X, Y, Z. Are they questioning it? Are they curious? Are they making introductions? Like, oh, that's pretty cool. I get what that means. And I think you do that over time. I was on another pod with like a CMO and we were talking about how do you get quality data quickly and make a decision on either a statement or positioning statement or when you're working with clients. And he had a rule, I forgot how many conversations, but my rule is the rule of 21, where when you have at least 21 conversations, usually around conversation 17, you'll have trends. You don't really need to take 21 calls or conversations, but it's about that number 17 to 21 where you get to assess, I know exactly what they're going to say. I know the problems that they're going to have. I can really predict who they are. And I know exactly like their personality, the actual issues that are happening. And you can literally predict the next sentence. And then it gets to about, I think he mentioned like 12 calls you get to that. I think it takes about 15 to get to the predictability point. But if you're able to do that and people are resonating with it and it's valuable and it's different to the marketplace, that's a unique approach that I would say lean into it. But there's the higher tier of like position, like here's who I am, here's what I do, here's the type of clothes that I wear, et cetera. Like that's the branding part. That's separate from offers, right? Because you can have the positioning thing, then you can have different offers that you can add value immediately to the marketplace and they buy some tangible output or some tangible transformation. It could be a small engagement that then turns into a larger engagement. So I think you don't want to think that your positioning has to be this grandiose, perfect thing. As long as you're heading in the right direction and identifying the gaps and making small splinter offers to drive into your larger backend services, and you start selling those, I mean, then it becomes blue ocean for you. Differentiated positioning, differentiated personality, differentiated niche. But then you're also saying, hey, my best clients actually do this thing. Do you want me to do that for you? Like, oh yeah, I've been wanting someone to do just that thing for me. They come in the door, see that you're cool, see that the team is well, see that you can add value. Hey, what does it look like if we were to work together at a higher capacity?
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm glad you made that distinction between branding versus offer. And we've had a lot of people on the show talk about branding. And like I always like to challenge them with this, which is like, yes, it matters, but it's one of those things where it's like, maybe I'll just put this question to you. Like, where do you feel like branding fits on the Maslow's hierarchy if you're talking about like a small growth stage business? And also, how do you define branding?
Yeah, I mean, branding is your reputation, what people say about you outside of the room. The best mentor in marketing I've ever had, he helped launch Yahoo, Amazon, and he's a brand marketer. So like I have deep respect for branding. I think when it comes to like if you're a small shop or you're a person or whatever, it's less about you got to look good. I mean, yeah, my website's it's not on Webflow. Like I'm still old school on WordPress. Like I'm not the cool kid on the block. But what matters more are the words. Are you actually being heard and are you talking to the right person, delivering the right transformation? So I would actually say that the words and how you communicate are more important than having a nice little website that like looks cool and is like responsive. So branding, if you're just thinking it as visuals, is not important. It is important, but it's not 80/20. Like you'll be fine with like a simple page as long as you're really cutting through the noise and adding value. But branding, when it comes to talking to the right person, saying the right things, and communicating value and differentiation, then it's the only thing that matters. But I think we should talk about its positioning and its proper marketing.
Yeah, no, that's great. That all makes sense. And I think a lot of the times when branding comes up on the show, it takes a while to figure out like what are we talking about exactly? Because
Mhm.
people will just refer to, a logo creation, or I've had
Oh
other people
yeah.
refer to it as absolutely everything, the output of everything, right? What do people say in the room when you're not there? Like that's the effect of all the things combined, right? So
It becomes very ethereal because branding really is an output in the bigger piece. Because it's like also asking what's an identity, like who are you as a human? Then you get like, oh, okay, philosophical, but the tangible, hey, I need to do this so that I can get results today. It's all about who are you talking to, how are you creating value, and how are you differentiating that value from the vast sea of commodities.
yeah, that makes sense. To go back to the positioning element, get a little more like into the bedrock of that. I think you talked about the idea of looking at research and trends kind of to see where the growth is and everything like that, which makes a
Mhm.
lot of sense. How do you sort of balance that with where your clients are best positioned to help and also like the sort of work they want to be doing? Like I know I've seen that Venn diagram image, where it's like the
Oh,
three.
the Igaki stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is. Like, how much are you taking that into account? Are you putting one weight on one of those things more than another? Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
My ethos is that the journey matters. So you have to be doing the work that fuels you. I mean, running an agency and running a shop and running a team and helping clients, it's not easy. There's going to be frustration points and you're going to be questioning, why am I even doing this? Clients come to me and they tell me, like, I wanted to shut this thing down 3 times in the past, like 3 years or 5 years or whatever. And okay, if that's going to be part of it, you might as well enjoy it. So there has to be that level of it. But when I ask clients and I really work with them is who have been your best clients and why? And cool, you do all these 5 things, or you have this, you can do SEO, SEM, you can do planning, you can do hula hoops and jump ropes. Okay, cool. But what's the number? And that's not insulting. It's just like we do so much, like great. Just because you do everything doesn't mean you have to. Out of all the things that you do, what is like the one absolute thing that it's very hard for other people to replicate and you're just like an absolute legend at? Like what do you do that's absolutely exceptional? And it gets difficult to answer that question because you really need to bleed into, okay, cool, we do strategy. Well, what does that even mean? What makes it so different? And when you hone into that, then you know, okay, this is the thing I actually do. Like we have 5 services, but we're actually really only good at one of them. Everything else we just do to keep, cash flow and support clients as they need it if they need more work. But here's the one thing, and we lean into that. When you lean into that, when you lean into what is the thing that you're actually doing for the clients, again, the what are the hands, what are the brains, what's the execution, but then what is the actual outcome the client gets? And we go from selling the service to selling the outcome and the output. And it becomes where the client can now buy either that thing as a product or an outcome, or you can even position that like, oh, it could be the way that you deliver that thing could be through an actual productization. It could be through like a done with you, a group thing, or it can also be done through like a subscription. So there's different ways to deliver that value. But we got to lean into the best clients. Why were they the best clients? How did you hit home runs so that we can really like replicate that? But then also like, what are you actually exceptionally good at? And your team exceptionally good at? Because we are not here to be mediocre. I don't like to work with people who just want to be okay and average. Like we need to be badasses. We're going to go out there and crush it. Like what's that one thing?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any signals that come to mind or maybe stories you can tell for like when clients are getting close to identifying that? And is it obvious to them or does it catch them off guard when they find it?
It's not obvious to them. So a recent client, we dove in and the main issue is around, so they work in like the nonprofit space and a lot of donor dollars come in and a lot of thing with the donor dollars, how do you measure impact? Right. So the bigger question to answer is how do you actually ensure that you're prudently investing donor dollars to actually create tangible impact, which is the purpose of why they gave you the money. So it's a bigger problem to solve. But when we highlighted that, it was almost like an aha moment that we knew was always there, but we didn't know how to communicate it in a way. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well, but like you always knew that was the reason, but it wasn't until someone said it. It was like, oh yeah, that's obvious. We should totally do that. And the key thing also, it relates back to the ideal client's personality, who they are, what their goals are, the transformation they're delivering to the marketplace. But then also it resonates like, oh, it's clear. It's like, it's always been in front of us, but we never saw it that way. And when you lean into that, then you can really start being, I wouldn't say aggressive in your marketing, but you can be really aggressive in your marketing and your sales and say, hey, this is how we are different. And then you start even creating community around that, being a thought leader around that. And that's where it gets fun.
Yeah, I think about that a lot where like when we have these breakthroughs every so often, it's usually like returning to something we used to do. It's what is it, the Dostoevsky line where it's like to return to the same place but see it for the first time. I might be misattributing it, but I feel that dynamic more like whatever getting towards a decade in business than I did in the early years, where it's usually about going back to something that used to work but didn't work back then because you didn't have context for why the thing was supposed to.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Yeah.
I can completely resonate that with me right now, who I am. Like there was like an energy or a drive. And then I'm like, okay, then touching back to that, like, oh, this is why it made sense then, but I didn't have the experience, the know-how, or like the knowledge. But now that I do, it's like it just clicks. There's that click moment, and I think it's important because it's cyclical, right? Time could be cyclical.
Exactly. And then it can happen the opposite way too, which is where you stop doing something that was effective based on conditions that are no longer the way they were when you stopped doing that thing, right? It could be something tactical in sales or it could be something much bigger. But yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I think shifting gears a little bit, I know that you talk a lot about the idea of leverage. And can you define that a little bit and how that plays out for your clients in different areas of the business?
Yeah. So that's been a huge thing for me, like talking to a mentor and just like looking at this as well. My favorite, I'm sure that's definition, but I highly recommend readers read the leverage equation. It really just breaks into how to look at leverage differently and how to look at different ways to create leverage. But essentially, you're leveraging other people's audiences, you're leveraging other people's time, other people's money, other people's network, other people's experiences. And that's actually how I grew. I would attribute my compounding learnings was through others' experience and then through myself. And then now having that as a point of leverage where others literally buy that with me so that we can work together and then not make the same mistakes. But when you look at leverage that way, like these are my tools of leverage, then you got to look at all the components of the business of like marketing, how do I create leverage there? The sales, how do I create leverage and even reduce risk for the clients when you're making deals? Fulfillment, how do you increase leverage there? And the equation I never learned about until I read the book. I forgot the author's name. The leverage equation, brilliant book, simple read, maybe 20, 30 minutes. You'll get the aha moment really quickly. But there's an equation there called the expectancy equation. And when you're looking at something intangible, like is this marketing campaign going to work? Is this hire going to make it like work out? Is this team going to work out? The equation is pretty simple, is that your probability of success multiplied by the gain minus the probability of failure multiplied by the loss of the failure. And then that gives you like a certain level of certainty, gives you certainty around a decision or a thing. And the cool part is the only way, not the only way, but one of the ways to increase probability of success is through leverage. And then the ways that you can create leverage and the ways to minimize your losses is through risk management. And if you're successful, it's like because you've been able to use that indirectly, but also think about how can I ensure I cut my losses where whatever decisions we take, we can still win. Like you don't always have to be all like the risk for risk's sake is, I would say, foolish sometimes. So when you look at that, I think it's important to look into your positioning statement. If you fail, so what? But what's the opportunity of that working? When you're making deals with clients, sometimes if you're making like the small deals, it's easy. Like they're buying a product or service, great. But if you're making back end rev share deals, equity deals, if you're playing that game, you want to identify the points of leverage and opportunity and risk reduction so that when every deal is different and every person's perception of value is different and every person's perception of risk is different. So you want to identify those things, call them out, and then work with them to create a win-win scenario. Or either way they win and either way you win. I mean, there's a lot that we can dive into that, but that's the fun in deal making. And then also with your team, want to create leverage through systems, technology, fulfillment, execution, and your delivery mechanism. If it's a productized service, if it's a subscription, if it's an actually true agency scoped project where it's a 9-month big build and you're actually doing like, how are you creating leverage so things work well or reducing your risk of like fail safes, like things, if something fails, we have a backup to that. If that fails, we have a backup to that. Like just thinking about it through every single process. That I can go on, but that's how I think about creating opportunity, maximizing your gains while also ensuring that the loss potential is still there. But how do you reduce those?
That's super interesting. And maybe we could go down the leverage as it applies to deal making hallway and talk about this a little bit. Like the thing that kind of surprised me about this is first, the downside is it definitely added friction to the sales process, right? It added a lot more like time and effort, and it disqualified people that maybe would have bought if there wasn't like a commission or, a rev share model baked into it. But I think the upside was it really differentiated the program more because it sort of glued results to it built more of a partnership dynamic, I guess, in a nutshell, more than like the other 5 competitors our clients or prospects might have been talking to. We see that with our clients as well. And then, of course, there's a leverage element when the performance is good. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how are your better clients thinking about leverage and deal making? Like, what are some of maybe there's underappreciated structures or like ways of introducing this and so on?
So I think going back to your example, like you use the deal to differentiate in positioning too, because you can leverage how you approach the offers to differentiate. So we got to look at the ways of why people don't make a decision. Time, effort on their part, energy, or money. Those are usually the main 3 culprits. Like, oh, I don't have the time to do it, or this is going to take too much of my effort and energy and time, or this is too expensive. So this isn't to say make crazy unconditional guarantees, like give things for free. Like there's a way to identify within the sales conversation. It's usually not really just one call. Like maybe I suck at sales, but I can't do the one call close. It's usually relationship building and identifying what's important for them and how can you differentiate through your positioning statement, but also through the offer of what they're getting. And I mean, if we look at Hormozi's brilliant example, is like their perceived likelihood of gaining that thing. And that's just the equation that we talked about, the probability of getting the success and then reducing to make sure that the risk associated is still less than the gain. So no matter if you take the bet, you're still going to win. I mean, I can equate this as easy like when we do like coming from the direct response space and overseeing tons of money in ad spend. You're going to make a return on ad spend. Sometimes it might be break even. Sometimes it might be somewhat profitable. Sometimes it's going to be negative. But you got to measure your bets and understand, okay, if it's at this point positive, break even, or negative, here's how we're going to make that up, or here's how we're going to scale the positive. So it's looking at it as that equation. When you put $1 in, what's going to be the output? I'm not sure if I answered your question entirely perfect, but it's very case by case and nuanced. I mean, when I look at deal making with my private clients and what they're doing, really at this point, I've been doing this enough where I know what's going to work, what's not going to work, and who is the right person to work with. So I look more for the who. I don't look more like the what is this solved. And I know if it's the right who, we're going to get results. So I can be pretty bold with the front end offer saying, you know what, like if this is not valuable to you and we build this thing, it doesn't even show you ways to grow and opportunities and strategies and how we're going to do it. Because it's a full on, like it's very immersive. then like you're just not going to pay for it. Because why would you pay me if I had no value? And that's different because other programs or other people out there in the marketplace, like you have to pay them, if not double or 3 times the amount for the initial engagement. And then maybe you'll get results if you push and you do the work. And maybe if you don't get results, maybe if you contact the right person, maybe you'll get some of your money back. So I know that from my prospective clients and my ideal clients that they're jaded. They've got all the promises in the world sold to them, and they don't know who to tell, like who's like a real expert versus someone who's just pretending and showing me the top line of their P&L statement when I know that I can just fill in all these equations and on QuickBooks to show that I made this revenue. People just screen share that. So that, I mean, that could be one way that I can just share an example.
Yeah, no, I think that's good and it makes sense. What I like about that and other devices structuring, like, making an incentive structure or rev share, is that it makes you have to do the thing that you yell till you're blue in the face that you say you need to do, right? Like everybody's
Mhm.
like, we only want to work with clients that are the right fit, that match us, that match the culture, that match these things. But then like actually making yourself do that over and over and over again is like really hard. But then if you have a policy that's like, well, we do rev shares and we make them custom or we make them in this way, then the deal itself or the offer itself makes you have to do that thing. Any thoughts on that or any like other examples of that? If
No,
that
I
makes
think that's
any
perfect.
sense.
It's
Yeah.
putting the skin on the game so that you're actually incentivized to get the result. I think that's a major trend, at least from my perspective. I know there's some industries that are still chilling and taking client dollars and not having to deliver on their promises and just doing the work. Like I've fired those agencies. But I think that's a huge trend right now when it comes to delivering marketing and sales results and performance in how I'm seeing the buyers shift. Like so many marketing agencies popped up since 2020, all these different, just a lot of different promises. But I think the key is buyers right now or prospects or great clients are looking for someone to partner with and take them to the next level. And they're weeding through and sussing through expertise, experience, but also the relationship piece. And I think that's the number one thing. One of my dudes, I was talking to him, he runs a portfolio company now. So he buys businesses, adds value, and he hires a ton of agencies to do all this work. And he told me that out of all the agencies that, because maybe they built 12, I don't know how many websites, but it was 6 or 12 websites, hired a dozen of agencies to build these things. And their work was amazing. The quality of their work, beautiful. They're creative, incredible. Like the way that they deliver, they're professional. But the one thing that lacked was they couldn't communicate well. They showed up to calls sloppy. They didn't close the loops correctly. And I think what I'm hinting at and what I'm talking about is the level of professionalism I think is going off the wayside. I think customer service is going to be a lost skill. Hopefully it's not by the right companies. But the level of professionalism, how you show up, how you listen, how you build a relationship, how you actually build strategy through that relationship, I think that's going to be a key differentiating point. And I think that's what buyers are looking for. They're not looking for someone to do the work. Because if I just wanted the work, I'd go to the cheapest cost. I want the outcome and I want someone who's dedicated to getting that outcome. And I think that's the real twist. And when you create a deal or an offer that is in alignment towards the outcome, the experience is good, and you're going to work with a professional, even if I'm working with their senior or their junior, like I don't have to work with the owner all the time. Like I know that. But if the promise is fulfilled through the execution and the fulfillment, and the deal is in a way where they're incentivized, they got skin in the game. And I think it's only going to work because I don't know. I feel like if there's skin in the game for both parties, I feel like I'm working with a professional. I feel like I'm working with someone who's actually incentivized, not just like practically to make it work, but they're doing it because like they're legit.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that's probably a good segue to talking about access, which is a big selling point. But I guess first off, can you define that a little bit? How you're thinking about access as a point of differentiation?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you. So one of my content teams, I'm telling them they should do subscription based, like the way that they're producing and pumping. One of my dudes, I think we talked about this on the pod last time. Like he was a soloist. He ran his own design shop, and then now he partnered with the 2 other guys here in San Diego. Now they're selling creative output, design, conversion, and branding. But he told me we had coffee, and he's like, "Well, it's weird. The clients aren't just buying us for the work; they're buying us because they want access to our brains and just to have us there. And sometimes they might not even request it, but they just want us there." And when you're selling a level of access, it's because you have the street cred. They're tapping into something that they either I don't know their buyer persona. So maybe it's a fear based thing, or maybe it's more of a opportunistic based thing, or maybe it's a greed based thing. I don't know. But there's something there when you're looking at who you're serving and the types of deliverables that you have and the trends in your marketplace. Like a lot of the design agencies are going straight to like, oh, I'm just going to copy and be a subscription service. But if you're just doing the work, then it really is a price at the bottom. When I started doing that research, I got a bunch of different ads. Every single ad was cheaper than the next. You can get all this video, all these things done for this amount. But when you tie that to strategy, then it becomes a different game because now you're paying for access to that strategy and implementing a proven strategy to your business so that you can model those same results and get the fulfillment on the back end to support you.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I've been on, some sales calls a while back, and most clients that come to us like value us for the strategy, but then occasionally we'll get people that are like, what if you should also consider doing this, or what if you did that, or if you use this other channel? And then I'll sort of get to the point where it's like, it sounds like you want to own the strategy, right? And you just want somebody to execute it. And then they're like, no, 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 no. We want somebody to lean on for the strategy. I'm like, well, then it's this process. And then oftentimes when I will get people saying like, no, we just need somebody to go do it, then I'll be like, well, great, going Upwork, you get somebody way cheaper than us just to execute on your strategy, which they're not ready to do because they don't really have it together, right? So I don't have a good question. How does that resonate?
No, but that makes a lot of sense because I mean, let's face it, agencies are only going to be with clients for a certain number of time. I don't know, that could be my hot take, but I don't think agencies are going to be with clients for like 20 years, unless it's like your legacy pricing and it's like what you started with and it's a great deal and it's hard for them to replace you. But agencies carry clients to a certain level. And then it's up to the client from there to decide, should I build in-house? Is my agency going to help me build in-house? That's a really good point of differentiating, by the way. Or what's the next level look like? And is this agency fit to take me to the next level if I so want to choose to grow? One of my dudes, we were chatting on Slack, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like the ethereal issue with agency owners, like the awesome results your clients get, and then they fire you because they took it in house. Like, oh yeah, my client last 18 months, like this month was their first $1 million month, and they let us go because she was taking it in house. I completely agree with her decision, but like it's hard, and that's part of the process. So I think it's not assuming that clients are going to stay with you forever. It's to identify where is the natural drop off point where it makes better sense for them to build in-house or partner with, maybe hire the CMO or the sales rep, or not the sales rep, but the sales development, the director or the CRO. When does it make sense for them to do that? And if you can take them to that level and then also say, you know what, you're here, here's your paths moving forward. We can help you and consult with you to transition so that whoever you bring on, we can build the infrastructure and they can like hold on the reins, or we'll continue doing this for you. And you don't have to worry about hiring like a W-2 employee and managing one person. We have a fail-safe of multiple people working on your account. And I think that's a cool way to make sure that you're continually adding value through the entire process, not just from the A to B.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think that ties into like, how do you feel about the state of agency services and like the purpose or like what an agency is, right? Because this is very relevant to us. We've built out a training arm of our business for that particular reason. Either people want to do it in-house from the beginning or they want to eventually do it in-house. We're now offering that. And we're very excited about it. But there's plenty of organizations that are like, we're not interested in training. We're doers. We want to do this kind of work and go, so on and so forth. Do you think that the world is moving like in a direction where training and showing people how to do stuff is like more important than it once was? Do you think that's going to be a function that most agencies need to take on, or do you think that there's still a way to like just say like, nope, we just do stuff and this is what we do and so on? When it's time to break up, it's time to break up with us.
It's a brilliant question. I think when you mentioned what does it mean to be an agency, right now there's so many definitions in the marketplace. So like I can't answer just that thing because it's really interpretive. But I think what you're really asking is training versus doing, and I think the world exists for both. I would say I really dislike, I can't just say all info marketing. I just dislike when people gate information. Now, what does that mean? So for all you info marketers listening to this, don't shoot me in the foot. Like, we have skilled info marketing companies, don't worry. It's when you're just holding back the information and you're just selling the information, because information essentially wants to be free. Almost everything can be learned. But the key thing is the application of the information. Information just to have information is like vanity. The application of information is wisdom. Now, how do you apply information? Sometimes we need accountability groups. Sometimes we need cohorts. Sometimes we need community through that. Or sometimes we need someone else to do it for us because we just don't have the time or the expertise. So when it comes to just selling information, like, oh, you got to pay $20 for this PDF, I think those days are gone. Personally, I know companies are scaling that and doing that well. I think those days are, at this point, just give it to them because they're not probably going to take action on it anyways. There's too much information. I think the key is guided implementation. And that's the cool part because it goes hand in hand. Do you want us to do it with you or do you want to do it for yourself? Obviously, the doing it with you, the cohorts, the programs, the communities, you can scale those pretty dramatically and have different revenue outcomes with way substantially higher margins than just agency work. But I think agency work is not going to go away because people still need other people to do the work for them at a value add cost, as well as like professionals. And I think that world of a cool agency that is pricing well and delivering value. And I don't feel guilt like bad paying them because, oh, ChatGPT can do this for me. Why are you charging me $500 per email? Like stuff like that. Like the days of just charging for like an insane amount are gone like that. But the days to add value and position yourself to value and really guide people towards results, I think that's even more prevalent now with the rise of AI, with the rise of too much information. But on the flip side, to your educational point, I think if you're guiding them to implement and you're like, when you're going on this journey with me, or like with like Dan, you're telling your clients, you're going on this journey with me, you're going to get the information that's cute, but you're actually going to apply it and get a result. That's unique. And I think that's what people still want and want more, but it really depends on the person.
Yeah, for sure. And like, learning is not synonymous with consuming information. It's like, yeah, it exists in the realm of action. I think that's a really good point. That's awesome, Raul. And I guess like kind of getting towards the end of our time, what are you excited about? Like, what are you working on in the next 90 days or so?
I'm excited just to grow the mastermind. So we did cohorts and then we focused on really just adding value and building that through getting a lot of guest speakers in the mastermind just to really help the agency, the professional agency owner who is maybe their second agency, third agency, but they're still growing and they want to figure out like the right framework to grow into like $250,000, $500,000 revenue. We give them the framework to hit the seven figures with at least 30% in profit margin. And then just private clients, I just really love working with clients who have an important mission. Like, great, you're building this, but why are you building this? And that big mission, tying it back to the work that they're doing, tying it back to the agency and really helping them thrive. That's always super exciting for me.
Yeah. And I'll just say that if you're listening to this and you're above those levels, you still might not have all of that foundational stuff tied down. So I definitely recommend checking out Raul's stuff and, going back to that. It's always useful. It's always valuable. So Raul has been so good as usual. Where can people go to get in touch and follow what you're up to and so on?
The best is going to be the website, dogoodwork.io. It's dogoodwork.io for input, output. You'll get the email, way to contact me by email, social, the whole nine.
Awesome. Thanks, sir.